The November wind swept through downtown Boston with a sharp bite that reminded everyone winter had arrived early. Office towers were slowly emptying as professionals hurried toward parking garages, subway stations, and bus stops, before another wave of freezing rain moved across the city. Streetlights reflected off the damp pavement, while traffic crawled through the evening rush. It looked like an ordinary weekday, the kind of night that rarely made the news. Yet within the next hour, one routine police encounter would change several lives forever. Alicia Brooks stepped out of the United States District Courthouse, carrying a leather briefcase, in the quiet confidence earned through years of sacrifice and public service. At 41 years old, she had built a reputation as one of the most respected federal attorneys in Massachusetts. Colleagues knew her as someone who prepared relentlessly, treated everyone in the courtroom with respect, and believed justice depended on facts rather than assumptions. Earlier that afternoon, she had spent hours presenting evidence in a complex public corruption case involving millions of taxpayer dollars. It had been one of the longest court sessions of her career, and mental exhaustion showed in the slow pace of her walk. When she reached the underground parking garage, she pressed the start button on her Lexus. The engine clicked once, then again, before falling silent. She tried a second time with the same result. A dead battery. She leaned back in her seat for a moment, closed her eyes, and smiled faintly. At the irony, after spending the day solving complicated legal problems, the only thing preventing her from getting home was a simple mechanical failure. Roadside assistance estimated more than 2 hours before a technician could arrive. Rather than wait alone inside a cold garage, Alicia decided to leave the car overnight and take public transportation home. She removed her navy courtroom blazer, folded it carefully into her briefcase beside neatly organized legal files, and changed into a gray Harvard Law hoodie she always kept for long workdays. She pulled on a black knit beanie, adjusted the strap of her leather bag across her shoulder, and walked toward the nearest MBT, a bus stop to anyone passing by. She looked like any hardworking resident heading home after a long day. There was nothing about her appearance that suggested she argued federal cases, advised investigators, or regularly worked alongside agents from multiple law enforcement agencies. She appreciated those moments of anonymity. They reminded her that titles and positions never defined a person's worth. At the nearly empty bus shelter, Alicia checked the transit app on her phone. Route 66 had been delayed by 14 minutes because of traffic and icy road conditions. She slipped her phone into her pocket and quietly watched the city continue. Around her, a young couple laughed while carrying grocery bags. Across the street, a construction worker finished his coffee before boarding another bus. An elderly woman carefully crossed the intersection with the help of a cane. Boston continued moving, each person carrying responsibilities and stories invisible to everyone else. As the cold wind intensified, Alicia reflected on a lesson her late father had taught her when she was a teenager. He had served as a police officer for nearly 3 decades before retiring with honor. Throughout her childhood, he reminded her that a badge represented responsibility, not superiority. He often said that good officers protected constitutional rights just as faithfully as they protected neighborhoods, because public trust was the foundation of effective policing. His example inspired her decision to study law and dedicate her career to public service. She believed that the overwhelming majority of officers worked difficult jobs with integrity and professionalism, making countless decisions every day under challenging circumstances. She had spent years working beside investigators whose commitment to fairness strengthened communities and upheld justice at the same time. Alicia also understood that every profession carried immense responsibility, whether someone wore a judicial robe, argued cases in a courtroom, or patrolled city streets in a police cruiser. Every decision affected real people. Assumptions made too quickly could damage trust. That took years to build. Fairness required patience, careful observation, and respect for every individual's rights, regardless of appearance, race, or background. Several blocks away, Officer Daniel Mercer drove through the neighborhood as part of an increased patrol. Following a series of recent robberies, dispatch had circulated only a broad suspect description, and officers had been reminded to remain alert while following department procedures. As Mercer turned onto the avenue, his headlights illuminated a quiet bus shelter where a lone woman stood waiting against the cold, unaware that within moments, an ordinary commute home would become the beginning of an encounter neither of them could have imagined. Officer Daniel Mercer eased his patrol cruiser to the curb several yards from the bus shelter. The flashing emergency lights remained off, but the bright spotlight mounted near the driver's side mirror suddenly illuminated the waiting area. Alicia instinctively raised a hand to shield her eyes from the intense beam. The wind continued to whistle through the shelter, as a few other commuters glanced toward the police vehicle before quietly stepping farther back. Mercer stepped out of the cruiser, adjusting his duty belt as he approached with measured confidence. Like every officer beginning a field interview, he knew each encounter required quick judgment based on limited information. The recent robbery reports had placed additional pressure on patrol officers throughout the district, and supervisors had emphasized the importance of remaining while respecting department policy and constitutional protections. "Good evening, Mom," Mercer called. "Would you please step away from the shelter and keep your hands where I can see them?" Alicia immediately complied. She slowly stepped into the light, keeping both hands visible and speaking in a calm, respectful tone. "Of course, officer. Is there something I can help you with?" Mercer studied her carefully. Gray hoodie, black beanie, leather shoulder bag, alone at night. While none of those facts alone indicated criminal activity, they reminded him of the general description broadcast earlier. Over the police radio, he knew broad descriptions required caution, but the similarities caught his attention. "We've had reports of criminal activity in this area," Mercer said. "What brings you here tonight?" "My car wouldn't start after work," Alicia answered honestly. "I'm waiting for the Route 66 bus to head home." Mercer nodded slightly, but continued observing her body language. "Do you have identification with you?" Alicia understood the importance of respectful communication during encounters with law enforcement. She had worked alongside federal investigators for years and appreciated the difficult decisions officers often faced in uncertain situations. At the same time, she also knew that constitutional protections existed to safeguard both citizens and officers. By ensuring encounters remained lawful and transparent, she maintained steady eye contact without raising her voice. "Officer, before I reach into my bag, may I ask whether I'm being detained? Or whether this is simply a voluntary conversation?" The question caused Mercer to pause. Most people either immediately handed over identification or became argumentative. Alicia did neither. Her tone remained composed, professional, and free of hostility. Mercer replied, "I'm conducting an investigation." "I understand," Alicia answered. "Could you tell me what specific facts connect me to that investigation?" Nearby commuters quietly watched the exchange. No one interrupted. One college student, standing near the edge of the shelter, discreetly lifted a phone, apparently recording from a distance without saying a word. Mercer's frustration slowly began replacing his patience. "The suspect description is similar," he replied. "Black female. Dark clothing, carrying a black bag." Alicia listened carefully before responding. "I certainly understand why officers investigate reported crimes. Public safety matters to all of us. But a general description alone may not identify a specific individual. May I ask whether you've observed any behavior suggesting I've committed or I'm about to commit a crime?" Her words were measured, never confrontational. She wasn't trying to embarrass the officer. She wasn't refusing to cooperate out of disrespect. She simply believed every interaction between law enforcement and the public should reflect the constitutional principles both professions were sworn to uphold. Mercer crossed his arms. "Ma'am, I'm asking for your identification." Alicia took a slow breath. "I want to cooperate appropriately, officer. I also believe it's important that every encounter follows the law. Respect for public safety and respect for constitutional rights can exist together." The cold air seemed even quieter. Passing traffic continued moving through the intersection, while the delayed bus remained several minutes away. Mercer stepped closer. "Are you refusing to identify yourself?" "I'm asking whether I'm legally required to provide identification under these circumstances," Alicia replied. "If I'm being lawfully detained based on reasonable suspicion, I'll respond accordingly. I'm simply requesting clarification." The conversation had shifted from a routine inquiry into a legal discussion neither person expected to have on a freezing sidewalk. Mercer interpreted her calm confidence as resistance. Alicia viewed her questions as respectful requests for legal clarity. Neither raised their voice. Yet the tension became unmistakable. The commuters exchanged uneasy glances as another gust of icy wind swept through the bus stop. The student holding the phone continued recording. Sensing that the situation was becoming increasingly serious, Mercer reached toward Alicia's arm as he prepared to take control of the encounter, while Alicia instinctively remained still, determined to stay calm, avoid sudden movements, and continue treating the officer with the same professionalism she believed every public servant deserved. The moment Officer Mercer reached for Alicia's arm, she made a conscious decision that would shape everything that followed. Instead of pulling away or arguing, she slowly placed both hands where he could clearly see them. "Officer," she said calmly, "I'm not resisting. I want this encounter to remain safe for both of us." Her steady voice contrasted sharply with the growing tension surrounding the bus stop. Several commuters had stopped walking altogether. The college student, recording from a distance, kept the phone pointed toward the scene, while an elderly woman quietly whispered, "I hope this doesn't get out of hand." Mercer's training reminded him that officer safety was always a priority, but so was using the least amount of force necessary. Still believing he had probable cause to continue the detention, he instructed Alicia to place her hands behind her back. Alicia complied without hesitation. The cold steel handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "I am complying," she said loudly and clearly, ensuring everyone nearby, including the officer's body camera, could hear her. "I am not resisting in any way." The arriving Route 66 bus pulled to the curb just a few feet away. The doors opened, but no one stepped off. Immediately, passengers inside looked through the windows in stunned silence as they watched a professionally dressed black woman in casual clothes being placed into handcuffs. Several people exchanged confused looks. One passenger quietly asked, "What happened?" Another replied, "I don't know, she was just standing here." Mercer carefully escorted Alicia toward the patrol vehicle. She walked without resisting, refusing to allow frustration or anger to dictate her actions. Years spent practicing law had taught her that emotional reactions rarely solved legal problems. Facts did as the cruiser door closed behind her. Alicia looked through the window at the flashing reflections dancing across the wet pavement. She silently began remembering every detail: the exact time, the location, the weather, the officer's badge number, the words spoken during the encounter. Every experienced attorney understood that details often became the strongest evidence. During the drive to the precinct, neither person spoke much. Mercer remained convinced he had acted appropriately based on the information available to him. Alicia remained equally committed to allowing the legal process, not emotion, to determine whether her constitutional rights had been respected. When they arrived at the station, Mercer escorted Alicia into the booking area. The bright fluorescent lights reflected off polished floors as several officers continued their evening paperwork. The desk sergeant looked up briefly before beginning the standard booking procedure. "Place her belongings on the counter." Mercer removed Alicia's leather briefcase and carefully emptied its contents: a folded navy blazer, a pair of reading glasses, legal notebooks, case files, a federal courthouse visitor badge. Finally, a dark blue credential wallet slid across the countertop. The sergeant picked it up. Almost absent-mindedly, he opened it. His expression changed immediately. He looked at the credential once. Then again, his eyes widened. The room grew unusually quiet. Printed beneath the gold seal of the United States Department of Justice were the words, "United States Attorney Alicia Brooks." The sergeant slowly raised his eyes toward Mercer. "You arrested Assistant U.S. Attorney Brooks." Mercer's confidence disappeared almost instantly. He stared at the identification before looking back toward Alicia, who remained composed despite the circumstances. She didn't smile, she didn't celebrate. She simply said quietly, "Officer." "I tried to explain that I was waiting for the bus." The booking room fell silent. Every officer understood that the issue extended far beyond one. Mistaken identity encounters between law enforcement and citizens depend on professionalism, communication, and mutual respect. Most officers serve their communities honorably every day, often under difficult and dangerous conditions. Likewise, every citizen, regardless of race, profession, or appearance, deserves to be treated with dignity and protected by the constitutional rights that define American justice. Alicia had dedicated her career to defending those very principles, and even in one of the most difficult moments of her life, she chose composure over confrontation. Her actions became a reminder that true strength is often found in self-control, respect for the law, and confidence that justice should be pursued legal process rather than through anger. In the weeks that followed the investigation, body camera footage, witness statements, and legal proceedings would force difficult conversations about policing accountability, public trust, and the importance of unbiased decision-making. Those conversations would ultimately reshape careers, policies, and lives, and remind an entire community that justice works best when fairness guides every decision. If this story made you think about the importance of professionalism, accountability, and respect between law enforcement and the communities they serve, share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe this situation could have been handled differently? What lesson stood out to you the most? I genuinely like to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy powerful thought-provoking stories with meaningful lessons. Let me know what kind of story you'd like to see next. Your comments help shape future videos, so don't forget to subscribe and join the conversation.